What is up, everyone? Welcome back. This is Jack Greenstock for another show of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm joined, as always, by my co-hosts. I'm going to pass it first to Spartan Grown.
Thanks, Jack. I'm cheers. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, all one word, no spaces. Or you could shoot me an email at Russ at GML Army or Spartan Grown at gmail.com, and I could answer all your lighting or growing questions.
Happy to have you back. And next up, we've got Brandon Rust.
What's going on, everybody? If you're not already familiar, you can find me at rust.brandon on IG, LinkedIn, all that other stuff. And yeah, happy to be here. It's been a couple weeks since I been on the show. I've been under the weather and then I was out of the country, and so now we're back.
We'll have to hear a little bit about your experience at Cannabis. I know you and Spartan got to meet each other. That'd be pretty cool. He told us that you made the comment. It's like, man, what are the chances that like the first time we meet in person is like overseas? And it is kind of crazy that that is
Yeah.
the way that it went down. But I'm happy that you two got to run into each other there, and maybe you'll have some interesting stories. But first, I'd like to welcome Matthew Gates into the room.
Yeah, everyone, you guys know who it is. It's Matthew Gates, IPM specialist. So I don't know if we have anything planned for today, but if you have any questions, put them in chat.
That is what is planned for today. It is Easter Q&A. So happy Easter to anybody out there who celebrates. I was doing some messing around online a little bit, doing some live streams, just hanging out. My wife was at a cannabis event, so I was trying to see what the live streaming was like on X. Turns out I actually prefer the Instagram for going live. But in this case, we're using Zoom to do it via YouTube. So cheers to all of you out there. Make sure to tag us with your grow questions, and we will get to them as soon as possible. One of my favorite questions I got yesterday is, how do you eat the bunny? Uh, and everybody's favorite response was ears first. I think that was the most popular response for the chocolate Easter bunny. So I don't know. Do you guys have any approach? Do you avoid the sweet? Spartans was saying that if he has it in the house, that he'll eat it, so he avoids getting it in the house. So he's avoided it. But me and Brandon were sharing some of our sweet toothery over the past few days or weeks or whatever it is.
Yeah, for me, I just had a package of Peeps. I try not to keep candy in the house because I'll eat it as well. It's terrible. It's like I don't know how what the statistics are on fucking how addictive sugar is, but that shit is hella addictive.
I certainly tend to agree, and I think everybody's going to have some sort of vice, and that's one that's really easy to indulge in because it's sort of everywhere. It's legal. You can get it from anything from a candy bar to Cheez-Its or
So
whatever. They have sugars and everything now. It can be hard to avoid, but yeah, it's definitely a temptation that I think is worth avoiding if you can. And I think not keeping it at the house is usually generally a good idea. So
I always say it reminds me of my friends who've they've like quasi quitted smoking, and the way that they like keep it in check is like, oh, I don't buy cigarettes, but if my friend has Smarten's, like, I know people like this. But yeah, and they're like, "Oh, could I get one or something?" I've never smoked cigarettes or anything, but
That's me with chocolate, bro. If you got chocolate
yeah, there you go. Exactly what, right? It's very
in
relevant.
you know how to tempt Spartan now if you want to, give him some sweets. He'll be right there.
Yeah, and they're really cheap right now, so it's a good time.
Well, actually, I would say on the contrary, they might be going on the up because, like I was talking about, I recently heard about and looked a little bit into. It's true. I guess cocoa prices are going crazy because
Oh
something like
yeah.
70% of the world's cocoa is grown in the coast of Africa, and because of the wet season, similar to San Diego, for the last 2 years, they've been getting unseasonable amounts of rain, and that has led to mold and other pathogens and things like that. So I guess the crop yields have gone down substantially, which is driving the cost of cocoa up like 500 something percent. So this is one of the most expensive times for cocoa, which makes up like 11% of your Hershey chocolate bar or whatever. There's lots of other products that use cocoa as well. And so everything like that is either going to get shrunk down or go way up in price.
Yeah, cocoa solids in general, I definitely agree. And with things getting warmer too, you have problems of just like finding good locations for, and also I think this is relevant also for like coffee and vanilla and a lot of the things that we think of as being almost interchangeable. I'm reminded of like a kind of an interesting scene from this Half-Life Alyx game that came out a couple of years ago, a VR game. Because in the story of the game, basically aliens take over. If you're not familiar with the series, but I think people in the chat probably are if they play games and stuff. But the point is that the character is regaling a turkey sandwich to somebody who was born after this happened. And the thing is that like when you think about it, a turkey sandwich, depending on how you make it, requires condiments and foods and bread and animal matter from various parts of the world, all put together in one thing. The example of modern convenience, and they made that point, and it just makes you think about things that are mundane and how not mundane they really are.
Can't you make a turkey sandwich with ingredients all from San Diego? I can go hunt my own turkey. I can make my own bread. I can grow my own lettuce, right?
Where do
And
those things come from, though, originally?
oh, okay. So you're saying like we're gonna go back to the origins conversation.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you can produce those things
But like
commercially in
they
various places, but
exist
I think the point
at this
was
point
like,
in the wild. Like I'm talking about
yeah,
going and
yeah.
hunting what is called a
Like
wild
lettuce
turkey.
isn't
It's
from
not
here.
domesticated. I agree, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
like for the uh, sake of the opposition, you could make anything sort of local. And in that very simple example, because I was like turkey sandwich, how does that have to be
Well, except for
global?
cocoa, right?
True.
And
Well,
coffee and
yeah.
vanilla.
Coffee is interesting unless you want to get into GMO where people are growing it outside the shade, but a lot of people I think would say is a fair way to keep prices down and more affordable. So there's a lot of different side conversations that can come up with this kind of stuff. But I think that cocoa is even grown in the Dominican Republic. I'm pretty sure I saw and had some when I was there that was locally grown. So it's interesting, like you're saying, the different climates that it can be grown in. Um, I think thankful for cannabis, we're not going to have to worry too much about that because it has adapted and can grow across such a wide variety of climates. It's almost incredible that, from like Alaska to the equator and everything in between, you know, north, south, east, west, and you know, there's obviously the southern hemispheres and Africa and all these other places that have bountiful lands that grow plenty of great cannabis outdoor, and that's not to even consider all the indoor, which a lot of it in modern times is being produced that way, which I think is sometimes for good and sometimes for bad, but it's certainly interesting the global nature of it and how it can exist so easily at this point. I think that's a testament to why it's survived and been so widespread, uh, adopted and enjoyed
I
basically
mean, that's the
everywhere.
best part, right? It's way better than a lot of ways. I think it's way better than other examples historically, like vineyards for grapes to make wine, even hop for beer, and also the other like wheat and other grain that you would add to it, right? And also tobacco, like just cannabis blows it out of the water for your ability, even like back in the day. Um, it's I mean maybe not too far back in the day, but even like several decades ago, it's way easy. You can do more. You can get more out of a singular plant, is my point. And that's like the best part about it. If cannabis were more like vineyards or hop, where you kind of have to get a whole bunch, I think it'd be way less modular. So it's a really cool thing about it, I think, very unique.
And I think it's being underground and sort of unregulated. It sort of flowed in a way where regulated crops and businesses, unfortunately, are not able to flourish in a free market like cannabis was able to for millennia, where like alcohol is heavily regulated, although taxed probably less than cannabis at this point in most legal areas. Um, it was interesting. I just watched some Top Chef and they were cooking with hops. And a lot of them have never, only one of them had ever cooked with it before because like they worked at a brewery for a little bit and they used the hops to make like baked goods with. And so they did well, but a lot of people like it was way too bitter and like it was funny. They had like certain flavors. There was like the citrus hops, they had like the black pepper hops, and then they had like, whatever the different strains were and things like that. But it's fascinating to see that process applied to cooking and how similar but also different at the same time it was with cannabis. And I think I don't know about hop cultivation. I'm sure there's certainly its own challenges. I know that we share a viroid that is a pester, I'm sure, to many people in the cannabis and home brewing communities or home growing of hops or cannabis communities. Obviously, the hop latent viroid has been one that's been a little bit of a pain in everybody's ass if you're trying to hang on to cuts for years and starting to see any drops in performance, which could also be related to other things. But oftentimes, I think that's one of the ones that kind of has gotten around pretty well in our community. So it's the one that we obviously talk about a lot, but it's still pretty difficult to identify. The name itself says
By
latent,
the
so
way, Jack, I looked at the reference I made earlier about the turkey sandwich, and it was a club sandwich, which includes like bacon, obviously turkey, tomato, lettuce. So
more
you were totally
complex.
right. A turkey sandwich wouldn't be enough, but a club sandwich makes the point. And anyways, yeah, that's the world for you.
Got to go get me some hogs. California is pretty fucking diverse, though. I will say, like, I think we do have we're one of the rare states that has kind of everything. So not everything, but pretty damn close. We produce a lot
It's
that
pretty good.
I mean, if you're gonna be somewhere like when there's a lack of food or anything like that, the place that produces most of the country's or a lot of the country's food is a good place. And granted, there's a lot of places in the Midwest that produce a lot of food as well, but it's the U.S. produces a lot of the world's food just generally across the board. So it makes sense that a lot of it spills over into people being craft ag and horticulturalists, like cannabis farmers and home growers and craft people like that. So curious, has anybody seen any questions scroll through the chat? It's mostly cheers I've been seeing so far. Saw somebody who joined me in my live stream earlier.
I did see one that was Hacky Homegrower wants to know, does anybody use magnetism to treat seeds prior to sprouting and things? And I'm really, when it comes to seed sprouting, I'll call it simplistic because otherwise people are, start throwing around old school. I don't feel I'm that old yet. But I like to throw my seeds into either root right cubes or right into the media, whatever it is. Just plant the seed like you would a vegetable. So no, I don't do anything extra, including magnetism, other than what's already everything's exposed to. So I haven't done that myself. I don't know about anybody else.
Seen like studies and stuff, but personally, I haven't taken to adopting it. I think Twisted Roots put it in his water, where he's got like a very strong magnet that like his hose runs across before it goes into the jug. So I've seen some people experimenting with it. I don't know how much it actually does, but I've seen side by sides, just like I've seen electrolysis or other not electrolysis, whatever the one with like the copper wires. You guess what I'm talking about. We've talked about this a few times.
Electroculture.
Electroculture, yeah. So I've seen similar claims with that kind of stuff. Also, I lump that in like the playing music to my plants and the hey, it's probably not going to hurt anything, so you can do it if you've got it available and have fun. Maybe try side by side, see if any of them do any better. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't invest like tons of money into some special magnet if somebody's trying to sell you a expensive magnet. There's cheap magnets and even like the best magnets you can get them if you look for commercial stuff available fairly affordably. So don't go spending hundreds of dollars on a magnet that you could invest in like a fan or dehumidifier or air conditioning or whatever type of unit would better benefit your grow in this circumstance, whether it's media or nutrients or maybe more seeds. There's a lot of other ways to invest your money. So magnetism is one that I'm curious about. Brandon, have you ever played around with the magnetism?
No.
That's not the secret to getting your plants looking so good.
No, like Spartan said, simplicity is probably the best thing to do. I typically take a wet paper towel, I squeeze all of the moisture out of it, squeeze it out really good, throw some seeds in there, put them in a plastic bag, and once they popped, or like Spartan also said, oh, I'll just put them in a root right cube and keep them nice and warm and humid.
Rapid Rooter is another brand if you don't have Root Right near you, or even the
Yeah.
Jiffy pellets that you get at like any big box store or garden center for a few bucks for maybe a dozen or 100 or whatever. If you get them on sale, like sometimes in the right season, you go in there after like planting's over, and they'll have tons of them for just a few bucks. So I think Spartan got to come up like that a few years ago, where you got a bunch of Jiffy pellets super cheap or something like that.
Yeah, I can get like a box of like 1,500 of them for like $250.
They're pretty simple. I mean, you just let them hydrate and then pop the seed in there. In a few days, maybe a day or two later, you've got
Yeah, I
a little
mean, the
sprout.
shelf life is forever on them, you'd think. And what's funny is if you hit the sales when it's out of season, like, instead of looking for them in the springtime, look for them in the fall if they still have them on the shelves. You can get them in clearance at like half of what they're charging, sometimes more. So that's when I pick those kind of things up. I know in the different stores that I frequent where they put the clearance stuff. So I always go by and look through the clearance stuff, just like I was going to a thrift store. I want to find the deals. And yeah, and I find rooting compound. That's another favorite of mine. I buy that once every about 5 years because I'll buy it on clearance for $2 or something in a powder.
Are you
And
talking about the stuff from Home Depot?
yeah, Home Depot in
That's
that
the best stuff.
good.
If you're not gonna use aloe, that's the stuff. It's the least expensive, man. And I'll tell you what, I have always had great success using that stuff.
That
5 bucks.
Bonide
Yeah.
brand rooting powder, just like purple cap,
Yep.
white bottle.
White
It's like
bottle.
super cheap.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, man.
I think it's like $5.29 for that bottle, and it'll do
Yeah, I think
like
I got eye clearance for 2 bucks,
3,000
bro.
clones or something like that.
Yeah. Lasted me years.
I'll splash it in transplants just because it's like I'm gonna run through it because it's so cheap. I don't give a shit. It's not like I'm paying whatever fancy marketed Mycos product. I used to pay a
Yeah,
lot more for some of those other brands that were similar. I think this is mainly IBA, but it does certainly
it
help.
is. Yeah. But here's the thing, I like to use aloe, but if I'm in a situation where it's like I'm depending on these things and I don't want to have any, hiccups in the process, that's my go-to.
I hate to say it, but from like an IPM perspective, I almost feel like not that aloe is going to introduce pathogens or anything super often, but like if you just had like a little bit of like a dead or wilted or lower quality aloe, like I know from one season to another, the aloe I see at the store, the quality is different, the smell, the taste, and the firmness and things like that. So I'm not taking nutritional samples of it, but
There's also hundreds of varieties of aloe.
that's true. But even going to like the same market that I go to, like seeing the same style of like sliced, arm size long aloe hunks or whatever. Um, it's the consistency in any biological, just like our own stuff, crop to crop, there's variances. And it might smell a little better, it might yield a little better, it might look a little better one crop than it did. Like your summer crop might not be as good as your winter crop, which a lot of people notice subtle differences in the flavors or yields and things like that from one season to the next. And I think the same goes for like I'm guilty of not eating in season, right? I'll eat stuff just because I like it, like all year round. I'll eat strawberries all year round because we've got them available. But they're certainly better when it's like strawberry season. And so I think there is something to getting something in season for sure. And that eliminates just some variable, I guess, where you don't have to necessarily worry about sourcing another biological product when you can have just like in your SOP, hey, use this little, I don't know, however tiny recommendation, dip into this powder, that you pour out of the bottle so that you don't contaminate the whole entire bottle. Have a little small cap or something somewhere that you pour into because a lot of people want to dunk into the jar and that jar will last a whole lot longer if you scoop a little bit out or pour a little bit out and then use that versus dunking directly into the because it's a small enough jar. It might be like, oh, I could just take my cut and dunk it in there and it's gonna soak up because there's a little wet spot in there. And before you know it, you've got a bunch of plant matter sort of making that stuff not as viable or as good as it would be long term if you poured it out otherwise. Generally, just I think a good tip is to not go straight into your source.
There's another question that's interesting. It says, do any of you have experience with a sea of green? And if so, what are your pros and cons about it? And I would say the reason I haven't been able to really do it is because I'm in a plant count situation. But when I was growing commercially, that was pretty much a sea of green on a large scale, and I loved it. But the cons on it is it's almost going to be a requirement that you're going to have some kind of automated watering. It's not going to usually be something that you're going to be wanting to hand water because you have so many more containers that you're dealing with. Maybe if it's a bottled water or some kind of situation like that, but Usually it's going to push you toward automation. So if you're not comfortable with automation, get comfortable with that first and then go that way. But I think it's I think it's the best way to grow if you're trying to just, I mean, because it's so, you could grow literally super 1 gallon pots maybe and just let them grow up and just harvest they're just basically going to grow colas, which could be super easy to trim and you're going to get the great expression and you're going to get the look that you want. And there's a lot of wins. You got a fast veg time, so you're not using much power where you use the most power, 18 hours usually. You get to even reduce power consumption there, and there's a lot of wins. It's just for some reason there's a lot of rules against it, and it does push you towards automation. But that's my answer.
Yeah. I like to do larger plant count in small spaces. So if you have a 4x4, let's say you're doing a bed, I'm usually running like 12, 16, sometimes even 18 plants in that small space where you just kind of do a turn and burn, maybe a 3-day veg on that bed, flip them. And what you do is you have more canopy maintenance, but you also get better yields, I think, that way as well when you have um, you're essentially like I'm looking at the grid pattern on my trellis and looking at having every single one of those 4x4 um, squares filled up with plant biomass that's going to produce, you know, X amount of grams per square foot. But that's how I like to do it too.
Yeah, I think the more plants you can fit in less area creates lesser demand on each plant to generate the yield that you would need for it. So like let's say you have 16 plants in a 4x4 and you're trying to get a pound. That's 1 ounce per plant. But if you have one plant in a 4x4 and you're trying to get a pound, then that's 16 ounces off of that plant. So like to generate that amount of root mass, you're gonna have to veg for a lot longer. You're gonna have to do a lot more training and generate a lot more energy consumption on the light used in the veg time. And I think most people would say it's going to be harder for one plant to produce 1 pound than 16 plants to all produce 1 ounce. And so you're giving yourself the easier approach. Like when I was growing in cocoa, I would do 6 plants or 5 plants in a 3 by 1.5, which is 5 square feet. So that's one plant per square foot. And each plant would literally be in a 1 gallon cocoa pot. And it'd be like 3 or 4, maybe 5 colas, basically, just like little baby baseball bats, like the mini baseball bats. I don't know if you guys ever seen like the shrunk down versions, but they're like 2 or 3 feet long. And it would just be like straight nugs. Like the node spacing was pretty tight. And it was just like barely even had to trim them. It was just like all bud. And my veg time from seed was 30 days. So that was the one thing is because plant count and you know I ended up finding I typically like to go more of like a monocrop because I'm doing a different strain each run. So I'll typically veg a bunch of stuff, see what's doing the best, and then take like two of the same, like let's say Spartan. My last grow, I was doing the project or the yeah, Project V, Vortex F2. And I popped maybe 4 or 5 strains in that veg. And then Project V was the one that was shining. So I'm like, I'm gonna take that to flower and then just do like a monocrop of Project V. And then next crop I can try whatever other strain. So, because and the reason that I did that is in doing the Sea of Green, I liked it because it offered a lot of variety. But with that, I was doing like like 6 plants of 6 different strains, and then you'd have like one super tall, one super small, and like one that vegged a little bit quicker, one that vegged like really slow. And so sometimes even like the feeding, like one would just be like not wanting any sort of nutrient, where everybody else is like really wanting heavier feed and things like that. And soil, I think, makes that a little bit easier because they'll sort of take what they want. That's one of the main reasons I went to soil, and it's still effective. So having a bed style, you can kind of get away with that. But what I end up typically doing because I also enjoy the training element of the plants is training out the plant so that it fills up. I usually use 2 plants to fill my flower space now versus 5. So I'd get, a little bit less variety, but every single crop I'm pretty much changing strain. So I have variety coming in that way versus running the same clone, I guess. So it's a one strategy that I think is worth implementing for sure, because I think a lot of people are overestimating how much vegging you need to do. and a sea of green will quickly make you realize, like Brandon said, oh, I'll veg for 3 days. Like they almost don't even need a veg. You can just flip it. Like
Yeah, did you see
if it's
this
a clone,
comment?
just flip.
You see the comment by Cheddar Bob? He said just that. He said he runs a perpetual 4x4 using 1 gallon pots. He can fit 36 in a tent, and he was pulling 28 to 32 grams dried per plant straight from the cloner into flower in soil. So he didn't even have a veg, right from the cloner to flower. He supplemented it with build a soil products.
Yeah, I mean, once I heard about like Frank Gigak's story where he was doing this like major like underground bunker grow, and he's like, I just grew more and more plants and like less and less veg, less and less veg, and like by the end he was like vegging them for like a day or two, just like for maintenance purposes, like moving stuff around or whatever. But it was never over a week, like he was just turning and burning. And the plants don't, the product that comes from it never seems to like be lesser in my experience. Like I've almost found like sometimes those little plants were like super dang. And I feel like they didn't suffer for not having a super long veg or anything. They still turned out excellent product.
I
I
think
will
I
say one
still,
thing though.
I was,
The Oh, sorry. One of the things that I have noticed, there are some varieties that do need veg time because they'll have more tendency to hermaphrodite without uh without that veg time.
and I was going to suggest too that I think that it's way easier to get um, consistent results, which is what you're really looking for with that kind of a grow, is to go from a clone rather than go from seed because the seeds they're all going to need they are going to need a little bit of veg time before they flip. Whereas a clone will flip a little bit, I think, a little bit easier than a seed.
Plus, with the clone, usually, oh, it's going to be a 2 or 3x stretcher. Like sometimes a seed, it's like, oh, this is
Yeah.
supposed to be a 2x, and it ends up being like 3 or 4x. And you're like, what the fuck? I got the crazy sativa, pheno that was like a 1 out of 16 recessive allele that sprung out, and it's just gonna keep on growing no matter what. And so you find that out in the first run. But when you have a clone, you're like, oh, I know that one, even if I flip it at, 3 inches tall, it's going to end up, 20 inches tall. And so I'm not going to let that thing get big at all. And yeah, so growing from clone certainly has its advantages. The other sort of downside I could say, other than plant count from having a sea of green, is the de-leafing process, whether you're at Mechanico or even in my own grow, pulling out like and working on 5 or 6 plants is just more time and attention to each individual plant versus like with 2 plants. Granted, they'll have more stalks and things on them. It's a little bit easier for me to like get my head and hands and body around that plant, even when it's like tucked in the tent inside the earth box. Once it's finally like in its final home, and so more plants can make it a little bit more difficult in going to the IPM case, where if you're not doing good crop scouting, if you're like, oh, I'm going to plant 32 plants in my 4x4 because the highest number is the best, and it's like it has a diminishing return at some point because you can only physically fit so much, but at the same time, being able to look through that, make sure that there's not bugs or molds or any other issues hiding underneath or between the leaves and stalks is a issue of concern that might be worth considering as well. So you got to have a sort of reasonable balance, allow airflow and things like that.
And another benefit I just thought about, and I'm sure Matthew can speak way better on it than I, is there's even an IPM benefit of having a really short veg or no veg, and that's your plant's not alive long enough to catch as many whatever, viruses and fucking pests and everything else. If the plant's just not even alive, you know.
A so-called bioburden kind of a
Exactly.
thing.
For like a whole more of the
Yeah.
month, if you can shave a month off or whatever, that's pretty huge, especially at the beginning.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
exactly.
and although we're mostly talking like kind of indoor, but like that's one of the benefits of like outdoors in somewhat it can be is that like maybe you can choose a strategy where it's less intensified at least. Certainly you can do that in indoor as well, but like that can be a benefit, especially if you can like rotate where you grow or you process the material back again, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I definitely but like then on the other hand, like yeah, like if you are refreshing the tissue essentially or the plant matter that you're having, then yeah, as long as you can index to make sure everything's good to go, you might have a more vigorous plant potentially. because there can be some of these pathogens that aren't like super like sometimes the effects that they have are not like very strong. Different populations of some of these parasitic microbes like Spartan was talking about. Um, but if you're able to kind of refresh, that can be a superior potentially.
It sort of reminds me a little bit of you were talking indoor versus outdoor, but it makes me think about the light depth greenhouse versus full sun or full season, where a lot of the full season people struggle with, do I let my crop run through October when those rains start to come? Some stuff might even need to go into November, and that gets issues with mold and rot, where the light deppers can sort of time out their season, where they're flipping at a certain time so that their crop is done before those big rains come down, and they could have veg stuff going on during that time for the spring crops, but then they're not really worried as much about, and even like you were saying, Matthew, if they know that there's like a certain pest season, they can potentially avoid planting or harvesting around certain other known pests or pathogens within that region.
I do feel like some people are beating their heads against a mountain, but they don't realize it yet, or they're not interested in realizing it yet. Where like with the budworm moth, like one of in other crops, one of the things that people do is, oh, I live in a place where it's great to grow this crop, but the moth also does really well. So what you do is you find out when it becomes active and when its peak adult activity is, where it's going to lay all the eggs and stuff, and you try to make it so that you're not like in this case you wouldn't be flowering at that time because the budworm larvae will not really go after at all for the most part, if there's like no inflorescence. So by doing that you completely obviate the huge cost. But if you live in a place where well if you live in a place where you can't do that, or if you're in a context where you can't do that, then people who can do that might be able to perform better than yourself. And I think that that's going to be some of the growing pains of cannabis on like a larger, at a community level. Us as people who grow or help people who grow, this is going to be, or people who cultivate and consume for that matter, is still going to be relevant to them. And I think that as if trade and that sort of thing becomes more expanded, whether it's legal or otherwise, that's going to have impacts as well. So that's a really good point, Jack. What do you think about that, though? Do you think I'm being too pessimistic? Or do you feel like there really are some places that are just kind of the best might be a little bit too reductive, but maybe contextually good?
I think it's fine. I think people make up their minds, and you know, it's up to each person what really matters at the end of the day to them. And sometimes some people put more stuff at the forefront, and others will wait until maybe a problem becomes bigger and it blows up in their face to start to deal with it. Where some are going to be more proactive, and certain regions, it's so interesting how different places, like some places are going to regulate and make that a big part of it. So they're going to be really hands-on with the process, and other places are going to be really hands-off. Say, hey, you get your permit, but then it's you do you, whatever, like, go have fun. And so I don't think that there's one size fits all. So I don't know. It's we did get a question though. If unless does anybody else have thoughts on Matthew's question?
No, but I just wanted to squeeze in and I saw anything grows bring it up in chat, and I just wanted to say, congratulations to Germany for legalization. I think it goes into effect, or it did hours ago. So big ups to Germany. We'll be there.
Are
And
you going out to Germany to the
yeah,
business?
yeah, I'm gonna be out there in a couple weeks. What was
Yeah.
that? The 15th through the 17th is the ICBC.
Maybe
Well,
you'll
well,
see Dog Doctor. I know he was just hyping up the big German
I
win.
already reached out. He's not gonna make it out there, but
Oh, bummer.
we'll
I,
catch up
I
eventually, I'm
saw
sure.
him in Spain.
Yeah, I
Oh,
missed
nice.
it, man. I went around looking. He was two or three times at his booth, and he wasn't there any time. So it was just crazy. I told him we'd
There's so
catch
many
up.
people.
Sure. Yeah, there was a lot of people. A lot of people.
Well, I'm happy Brandon's back and feeling better. I know a lot of people got sick from the travel, from being
Yeah,
at the event.
look
I
at we're
think it's
35 minutes in and Brandon hasn't even talked about the event. Brandon, how'd you like the event? Well, I don't want to break in and change the subject if you had something you really want to talk about, Jack. Did you have a question? We had a
we do have a good one, and then we'll get into the
All right,
spam
let's do
stuff.
that first. Yeah, and then let Brandon talk about Barcelona. I thought it was pretty
Free Sin, I think is how they say the name, but I could be wrong there. Hey, Cheap Home Grow, I wonder what's your guys' favorite seed vendors slash sellers slash banks? And I guess I'd throw at least one out there. I like JBC Seed Bank, and that was a good one. They've shipped in the US quickly. I actually have used Seedsman in the past, and they got stuff to the US. Their shipping was a little bit expensive, but they had a breeder that I was really wanting, a strain that I really wanted to try, and it came with a bunch of freebies, so can't really complain there. Prices were reasonable otherwise. It's almost like when you buy a airline ticket and it's like it's gonna be this much, and then by the time you check out, it's like, oh damn, it's way more expensive than I was expecting with the taxes and the secret, ultra stealthy shipping option. But I will give Seaman credit being an international shipment. It came in like a Barbie doll package, and it was like hidden in like the bottom of the packaging. It took me a while to find it, so it got through the customs where a lot of stuff unfortunately gets snagged. So it is interesting when you choose the discreet option, what they end up choosing to hide it in. Sometimes I've heard people have like difficulty
Brandon,
even
how
finding
did
it.
you solve? Oh, sorry, I shouldn't interrupt this. It was relevant to what you were saying, though. Brandon, when you have the time, tell us about how you were able to figure your thing out with seeds. Anyways, keep going, Jack.
That's it.
You mean shipping seeds? Are you talking about me shipping
Actually,
seeds?
you know what? Forget I said anything. I don't want you doing. Weren't you trying to? Well, for Barcelona, were you not trying to?
Oh, I brought seeds with me. I just put them in my fucking bag, and I put them in my carry-on or whatever.
Oh, I thought you were. I thought that was going to be kind of a no-go. I'm glad to hear that it was not so difficult.
No, I don't think they fucking care.
They
Actually,
would
I heard
care
that
if
was
you
a major
declare.
criticism.
I don't know, like Frank from Purple Caper had like a lot of seeds and he had a little COA that said it was hemp or whatever. They pulled that shit out and they didn't fucking say anything to him.
Yeah, I mean it's smart to have
Damn.
a hemp COA.
But yeah, no, I just fucking brought him. I said fuck it. I didn't have like a shitload of them either. I probably only brought like 20 seed packs with me. And I didn't even end up selling them. I ended up giving them all away.
You're just like Johnny Appleseed, though. So
Usually when you give people seeds for free, sometimes they grow them. You would think it'd be a higher percentage, but it's I think when people, even if you make them pay $1 for something, they're like more when they're invested in it, it's like when you go to it's called Aldi, the fucking grocery store. You put a
I
little
know
quarter,
Aldi.
you put a quarter inside the little shopping cart, and then you are way more likely to bring it back, right? To get that quarter back. And so many people do. You never see all the shopping carts floating around in the middle of the parking lot like a lot of other places. That quarter is enough to get people to walk that, few steps back to go get that quarter. And it's interesting, you know.
Yeah, you can probably judge a person and how decent of a person they are, whether or not they put their shopping cart back where it belongs. Because I always do that shit.
That's
And if
what
I,
they say.
You
you
would
know what I
like
mean?
the
I
yeah.
see
YouTube.
people, I'll see people just be like, fuck you, leave it right there in the next fucking space.
Oh,
And I'm like, that person is a
Dude, it hits
fucking
people's cars and
asshole.
shit, and
I
it
know, and
causes
that's
lots of
another
damage.
thing that I tell people. As a pro tip, never park next to the fucking cart exchange. Never park next. I mean, you have such uh, a higher likelihood of having your car hit by a fucking stray cart or some asshole that just like, or some kid that's like, what? Like fucking pushing it into the fucking, all the other carts and shit. So don't park next to one of those things either. I
There's a
never
pretty
do.
funny YouTube channel called Cart
Sagacious
Narcs.
advice.
And Cart Narcs, this guy, well, it's actually like a group of people now. They go around and they like just walk around parking lots with like a body camera. And the dude wears like a bulletproof vest because he's had like guns pulled on him at this point. But he basically like asks people to put their cart back. People get so pissed
Oh,
off.
there you go.
And then he'll like when they go to drive off, he'll put like lazy bones on board stickers, like not a sticker, a magnet, a non-marking
Wow.
magnet. And then they like get out of the car and they get in these big fucking arguments with them. But it's a fucking silly ass YouTube channel, I guess. But it's like ultimate shaming people into trying to put the cart back. And yeah, certainly interesting dynamics there. I never realized it was such a thing because I guess one of those people who just fucking puts it back. I never thought like the pulling it up in between two spots or like curbing it was a cool way of going. I guess maybe I'm ableist, I'm able-bodied, I can walk it back perfectly fine, even on my most painful, fucked up day.
No, man, it's just the right thing to do, and everybody knows it. You shouldn't have to explain. It's
If you
like,
can walk it around the store for however long it took you to get the groceries,
yeah,
unless you're like in one of those little electric, carts or whatever, then I think, it's just courtesy, right? Decent human in
and
society. It's
if
sort
you've
of like a
ever
litmus
seen,
test.
if you've ever seen one of those things just flying across the parking lot because a wind caught it and smashing into
Yes.
somebody's car, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, come on, that's why we do these things. Why we put them away so we don't have to worry about that when we park here.
It also says on every single cart stall at every single place, we are not liable for any damage done to your car if you park in this lot by any of these carts, because wind does sometimes thousands of dollars worth of damage. Like, depending on what kind of car you're driving, if that stray cart hits you, it's like getting rear-ended, by like a motorcycle or something. Like it's damaging your bumpers. It might crack, shatter windows and things like that. So certainly not the best scenario, but what about speaking instead of carts, what about seed vendors? Spartan, you haven't spoke up on that one. Do you have any favorite seed vendors that you like to go through?
Oh man, I got to be the poo-pooer again and be like, I don't use, why would you use a seed vendor when you can just go right to the source and reward the person who did the work and not pay a middleman to, I'm not going to say bad things, but just go right to the source. That's what I do. So if you know the breeder, you already know the breeder that you want. They're usually pretty easy to find online and find their social media and send them a DM and say, hey, I'm interested in your seeds. Boom, they're instantly flattered. And then ask them, how much it would be to get some seeds. And that's the best way to get seeds, if you ask me. Especially when you can talk right to the source and you can tell them, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm interested in. They might have something in their arsenal you don't even know about that could be like even cheaper because it's old or something. So
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
just
I
a
would
little
say,
different?
yeah,
I
I'd say
think
go right
people
to
are
the
using
breeder.
seed banks because they might not have that inside information. They not might not be in the know. It's kind of like if you're somebody who enjoys rap music, right? But you're not in the scene. You don't know who all the hit characters are behind the scenes. You don't know the underground rappers. You only know the pop rappers or whatever. Like, so I think that the seed banks do serve a pretty good purpose. But
Well, I'll say
again,
this. On top of like, for the people that aren't in the know, like when I reached out to Subcool and asked him where should I get his seeds because I felt there was unauthentic vendors both online and on Instagram. I was like, hey, well, who
definitely.
should I go through? He said, or I said, hey, can I get seeds from you? He said, no, but go through JBC. They fucking pay my bills so I can fucking eat and shit. So I'm like, okay, I'll go through JBC in that case. But in the other case, like Spartan just said, I also highly agree because when I went to CSI Humboldt, they like are old school. It was like check or money order in the mail. But when I did that, I got fucking the both packs I ordered, the 79 Christmas Bud and the Pine Tar Kush. I got like I want to say 11 packs or something. And I think he sent like 20 packs. And then on top of that, I got like two 5 packs of each as like freebies that were like nicely packaged. So if I wanted to give them out to anybody else or like have them separate after I do like a big hunt, I could have them labeled and separated on the side, which I thought was very professional. And he also gave me some like TK crosses and some other femmes and stuff like that. So when you do go through the breeder oftentimes, you will get hooked up fatter. I will say, unfortunately, Jack Greenstock is not one of the breeders who has the ability to hook it up super fat currently because I just have one strain, but I try to do the best with what I can. But I know that there are other breeders out there. Like in this case, I like to shout out CSI Humboldt. I thought he had good strains available in that case, and there's many others that I didn't name. But he does a lot of good work with feminized S1 and things like that. So that was a breeder because this question also asked about favorite vendors, sellers, banks. So
Dark Star is a good vendor, and also another one is C tier now, which is James Beans. He's super legit. He's been in the game for a super long time. Chad over at Dark Star's a good dude, and he always hooks it up.
I'll
Well, I'm
say
saying,
Irie.
where Todd's not here right now, but he's got beans available on, is it Daga?
Daga.love.
Yeah,
Yeah, shout out Daga.
Dog.
Daga.garden. And you can get
Yeah,
them on
everything on there too.
amyaces.com.
That's a really good place to find like unique stuff that's going to be different from what's currently available, like on most of the legal markets.
Is that Peter who's running that through Future Cannabis Project?
Yeah, I think even he even has stuff on there that I don't even have left yet.
That's awesome. I know Amy Aces was like that for a while. You could go to amyaces.com and it would like forward you to the Daga.garden forwarding page. And I think sometimes for breeders and like myself, like if you're busy in life, it's nice to have like a bank who's taking those emails, answering questions, taking payments. It's worth that. Sometimes, usually, like the breeder gets like 50%, the bank gets 50%, depending on who you're working with. And so that is a little bit ridiculous to some people. But for certain breeders, it's just like, hey, they're happy with the cut that they got. And it takes a lot of
Here's
the BS off the plate for them, so they don't have to deal with the returns or issues or questions like that gets handled by the bank, ideally in that case. But sometimes the breeders
Another
have enough
thing to
time
be
for it.
aware of. Another thing to be aware of is a lot of these larger seed companies. Their business model is to make seeds. It's not to breed. It's to make seeds, and so you have to be aware of that. So a lot of these companies white label bulk seed from places like Colombia and South Africa. That's one of the things that I found out about in Spain while I was there. I didn't realize how many of the largest companies are doing just that, where they're not really. They might be taking something like a clone and then reversing it onto a bunch of other clones, and then that's their thing. But they're doing it at like large scale. It's not as controlled as you would think it would be, and they're not like working lines. They're not like, oh, here's the fucking new thing. It's just like whatever's hype at the time. They're gonna, you know, grow a bunch of seeds out of it, do open pollination, get a bunch of fucking seed. So it's important that people understand that there's a difference between people who are doing line work, they're like breeders, and seed companies. It's like, because I'm not a seed company, but I breed, right? And it takes me fucking forever to release new stuff because I fucking test it all out and I'll fucking do this and this and that. And, then there's the companies that are like, every single month they drop 20 new varieties, 30 new varieties. And I know as a grower, there's no way that they're testing that stuff out or, so they can look at what the progeny looks like, what the different flavor profiles or anything like that.
I mean, admittedly, it's very hard, right, to tell a feckless, mendacious miscreant from somebody who's doing something on the up and up. And this is a constant problem that I even have. Like, everyone knows my opinions about like genetic resistance and pests for cannabis and other plants too. Like, it's like how are people proving it? And a lot of people just say things, and obviously, like, you know. Not just like traits, but also like you just said, it's just easy enough to just write on a Sharpie. People have been doing it for, 6,000 plus years. So, you really got to have that trust, and you shouldn't dispense that trust easily, I feel like. If it's very important to get what you're trying to get, I guess, which for a lot of people, if they're spending the money for a premium product, quote unquote, they are. So, yeah, be you know, parsimonious, but also be, assiduous. Like ask those questions, find that information out, seek out that, like Spartan was saying, try to seek out those people or seek out an appropriate distribution. And then for people who are making those distributions, make it easy for people to tell, that what you're doing is what you're doing. And but like people who lie really well obviously don't look like they're suspicious anyways. So it's kind of a self-defeating problem because the people who will fall for it are people who are going to be trusting that it's fine. And there's a lot of cannabis lore out there that isn't recorded and never will be. Um, I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing. I actually think a lot of it is human history that should be recorded, but people talk a lot of stuff and things get twisted really easily. So it just makes me kind of, as always, just a little bit reticent to believe various claims about things.
I
Anyways,
think the easiest way to identify if somebody's actually doing work on like testing is if they're posting photos of the results. You can see their strain that they're posting about will have like, here is the F1 of this, and then here's the F2 or F3. And you'll see them growing that out, and you'll see their testers growing that out. Where if somebody says, I have this wedding cake crossed to Girl Scout cookies, crossed to GMO, crossed to
Gelato.
blueberry, crossed to Oreos, crossed to Skittles, crossed to Gorilla Glue, crossed to whatever, and then they next month come out with a whole new line of the banana bread crossed to all those same cuts. And then the next month they come out with whatever line crossed to all those cuts plus one of the crosses from the thing before that. And when you're coming out with 20, 30, 40 lines a month, it's just there's no feasible way. There's no photo evidence. So why would we assume that they're actually doing the testing? It's just they're not. And then like Matthew's saying, a lot of the people that are consuming it aren't even necessarily aware that there's different levels, like Brandon or myself or Spartan or Tao or anybody who's on these panels who's actually growing a handful of strains and trying to work them is putting a lot more time and effort into the work versus someone like Masonic or some of these like larger banks that say that they have every single strain. Like if you want to whatever like Amsterdam Seed Bank or whatever, like fucking Canadians, a lot of these seed banks, it's just like, oh yeah, of course we have Blue Dream, Forum Cut Girl Scout Cookie, Mac One, and like it's not Mac One S1, it's just Mac One. It's just like they label everything as the hype name, and of course they have every single thing, but it's by them. It's their version. It's Canada Seed Bank or Amsterdam Seed Bank version of Girl Scout Cookie or Gelato or Mac or whatever it is. That's the new hype thing, and a lot of the people just buy it because they Google and Blue Dream seeds, and then this is what pops up. They'll click the first link, and then they're available. Oh, hey, it's in stock. They're only X amount of dollars, and they'll ship it to my door. So a lot of people buy it, and then like Brandon's saying, they're disappointed because yeah, maybe they had a cut somewhere that they reversed onto something, but they're not doing a lot of quality control checks. And the stuff's getting oftentimes just bought and sold and white labeled. Like they're buying it from somebody who's got a greenhouse full of crosses that they're making and unknown amounts of males, females, and reversed males and females and things like that, pollen flying every which direction. You're not even sure what strain you got as the strain that you think you got. And I think it's nice to actually be able to put a face to the breeder. I got to shake Nat Pennington's hand from Humboldt Seed Company. He was at uh, one of the current events with his daughter, and like he's got pictures of him and her from when she was a little girl, and now she's like, grown woman. And it's just crazy to see like, his progression throughout the cannabis space and to see all these people that have there is truly legacies in this game. And if you look around and listen to people's stories, sometimes people are just blowing smoke, but there are some people that have the photos to document the stuff. Like I would give Josh D the credit with like the OG, him and Matt Berger's crew. Like they have photos of the shit from back in the 90s and like they have how they got it from Florida to California and when it started blowing up and why the name changed. And like if you have all of the steps traced back, it makes sense. Like you have the provenance to explain where it came from. And I think that we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. No one's really ultra that special in this game. But some people, if you're looking for X, Y, or Z, certain people have it available at certain times. So if you want something grape or banana or pineapple, there's going to be multiple breeders that have grape, banana, and pineapple strains out there. So it's how grapey is it going to be? How banana is it going to be? How pineapple is it going to be? Or what other notes are going to be in there? What did they cross it to? That's not the grape or the banana or the pineapple. And, is there even that note that you're looking for at all? Are you going to find that in the 5-pack or the 10-pack? Like Subcool, RIP, used to always say, if you can't find it in a 5-pack, then it's not worth growing. And that's sort of the standard that I grow for is if I can't find it in my first 5 seeds, something that is like the description, then I think that maybe it's not worth my time to spend growing it. It's at least a 100-day commitment. Like going to the cocoa example, vegging for 30 days, flower for, let's say generously 70. To be guaranteed it's done. And you've got yourself a 100-day. So, a third of my year is being committed to that strain. I want to have some sort of uh, expectation that what I'm growing is going to show up like what I want to, with speaking of Nat, I got some of his Collie Man Kush. I was hoping to get his think it used to be called Asphalt Plant, but now it's called like All Gas OG. And that was part of the Collie Man Kush. They didn't have the Asphalt Plant available. I also got some of the Blueberry Muffin. I know Brandon's grown some of that. What do you think about the Humboldt Seed Company gear? Brandon, do you have any luck with any of their stuff?
I've known Nat for a little while now. Actually seen him in Spain too. Um, I've grown out. I think I've only grown out their blueberry muffin, to be honest. It was good. I liked it.
I got that one because it's like what they're kind of known for. And I was like, hey, fuck, I'm here. I got to talk to him in person. I haven't bought seeds in a long time, admittedly, because I have a giant collection of seeds that I have some of your seeds. I have some Brandon or Spartan seeds. I have some Canna Queen seeds that I want to get to. And I've got seeds Eagles gifted to me I want to get to, and a whole bunch of other seeds. My own that I've made that I'd like to get to, and some crosses that I'd like to be making. So I'm not in a really giant need for seeds, but when I see somebody in person like that and get to shake their hand and talk to them and uh, get to, it's right there. Like you're saying, we were talking about earlier, Spartan was saying, like getting it directly from the breeder. When they're at an event, I know he paid for that booth. It wasn't free. So it was something I had thought about getting for a while. I've tried a lot of his strains. I kicked myself in the ass for not. I've told the story 100 times, but there was a chance where I could have got this pineapple upside down cake. It was a clone, which is very notoriously from Humboldt Seed Company. And this was probably like 5, 6 years ago on 420. But I was like, there's no way. There's way too many, fancyisms to that strain. It's not going to live up to the expectation. And maybe 2 years after that, I got an eighth labeled pineapple upside down cake. And as soon as I cracked the jar, it smelled strong like pineapple with like a little vanilla kind of cakey undertone. I was like, holy fucking shit. This is everything that name led me to expect. And it wasn't a letdown. It was actually like it surpassed my expectation. It was unbelievable. And a lot of the stuff I've tried from them has been amazing. Sun-Grown 707 had some like vanilla cream or caramel cream and a few other really good ones. So I got to try when I went up there and visit him, and he gifted me some what used to be called uh, Jelly Ranchers. Now it's called Hella Jelly. In that case, he was smart. Jolly Ranchers. This is for the cannabis community. Listen up. I talked to him about it. I was like, hey, I grew some of your Hella Jelly, and he's like, oh yeah, that's called Jelly Rancher. Or no, I said I grew some of your Jelly Ranchers, and he goes, oh, that's called Hella Jelly now. And I was like, oh yeah, well when I got it, it was called Jelly Ranchers, but I see it's smart that you changed. And he said that they reached out to him, and they're actually nice because he changed right away. And I think he might have already changed at that point, but it was out there for a little bit. And Jelly Ranchers was close enough to Jolly Ranchers, and they said actually he might have won the case because Jelly Ranchers was different enough than Jolly Ranchers, but he said it wasn't going to be worth the time and legal fees. So it was just like a clean separation. They just said, hey, you go about your business, keep doing your thing. You change the name. It's not like his only strain either. He's got like fucking 40 in his catalog. So I think he might have had a chance to win there. Where a lot of people, it's like Skittles was like basically their whole entire thing, or Gorilla Glue was like his whole entire thing. Cookies was their whole entire thing. So the difference being with Humboldt Seed Company, he's known for the blueberry muffin, not for the Jelly Rancher. So he changed it to Hella Jelly. It wasn't a big deal. So good on him. But I know not everybody's in that situation. I think Oreos is probably one of the other ones. It's probably going to get smacked here pretty soon. What are they going to call it? The O. That's what they did with the Skittles. They just started calling it the Z.
No, they already did. They got a cease and desist from Nabisco probably 8 months ago. It's called Ozo now.
Ozone.
No, like OZO, I think is what they were calling it.
OOZO. Okay. I didn't realize that. I knew from the beginning, like that one, it was only a matter of time. I didn't even know who was behind it. And I
That's
thought that might have been
it's Max Yields out of Michigan.
okay. Yeah, I knew it was out of Michigan. I wasn't sure who it was, and I thought I heard somebody like that. But yeah, it's dangerous, man. I think you're playing with fire when you start using big brand's name and just changing one letter and thinking, especially when you start using colors and similar slogans. Taste the strain, bro. Like,
Taste
and
the strain, bro. That's funny.
that's what they
Yeah,
said
dude,
with
it's
Skittles.
you got to be, I think people need to be a little bit more creative. I think the thing is the reason why that these brands do so well, what something like Runts, is because that is very familiar. But if you were to do something like, let's say, Hawaiian Ice, right? I think it would do something just as well. You could market that and package it, and it's not infringing on anything, right? It's just so general.
Yeah, I think cookies is kind of going that way, or gelato is another one. There's a brand gelato here that's not like the strain.
And why is
I,
being classy such a
I
bad
think
thing?
cookies is kind of like might be done. You see, did you guys see what was happening? They're not even.
No,
They just lost their flagship store in San Francisco. They can't use the cookies name because of legal issues. So I think they're called Blaze Cannabis or something like that now.
Yeah, I did hear about that.
I hate to say good because I don't love to wish ill upon people, but like, although he
I'll
is
say
fighting
good.
cancer,
I'll say
but
good.
that
Yeah.
people like to be like, oh, he's got cancer now, so you can't make fun of Burner. But I
I'm
still
not
think that
making fun of him. I'm just saying it's good when you take.
Beat cancer. He doesn't have cancer, so you can go ahead and
we
not
can
feel
make
bad
fun of
about
him
it.
again. All right,
It's
well, yeah,
not.
well, fuck
It's
Burner
not
for all
good
the
in a.
business shit that he does. The cancer aside, he's just a terrible person. His business, he would rob people back in the day. Like small home growers steal their cuts. He would sell powdery mildew weed, which we got from his fucking flagship store on Melrose, gifted to me by a friend. His
Yeah.
fucking Georgia pie that
I
they're
had
so proud of. They're vertically
I had a
integrated, how they
buddy who
brag
used to
about
do all their macro shots, and he just would always tell me horror stories.
just powdery mildew is like his, they grow
So
as much of that as they do bud.
It's just not
he's a
something we
bit.
need in the industry. We were getting so regulated by not being able to do anything on our packaging, but somehow they get to call their product cookies when we're always accused. I mean, I can remember having to change packaging because it had a drawing. It wasn't even a real picture, a drawing of an orange on it, and we had to redo all our packaging because an orange might appeal to children. But they can have a whole brand called cookies, and that doesn't appeal to children. It was like ridiculous.
Not
The
only that, but if
standard.
you look at what he promotes, cocaine and Xanax and all that other shit, it's like that ain't what we're about in the fucking cannabis community.
My wife went to this women's and weed event, and Erica Badu was there, and apparently she's working with cookies. So she got gifted this sample, but it's like Spartan was just saying like, oh, all this other stuff is like marketing at kids or whatever, but cookies isn't. But this is like literally looks like it's a little like ice cream thing almost, but it comes in a little basically like a what looks like a paper ice cream container, but you pop it open, and then there's this really cheap, the cheapest I've ever seen, plastic uh little jar that's like barely filled on the bottom, and probably not even going to consume this to be perfectly honest. This might go straight to the trash, but when you get samples, you just throw them in the bag and keep on moving, and you're not going to be rude. I think Erykah Badu has some good music. I'm not going to hate on her too much, but usually celebrity weed brands are not the best, and this is typically why. And one of the things I did notice, the biggest change from Hall of Flowers last year to this year when I went was there was like the 30% new brands, 25% of them were just cookies growers who were tired of getting fucked over by cookies saying, "Hey, yeah, we'll buy all your stuff, but I know we said we'll buy it for 2,000 a pound. Now we'll pay you 200 a pound," type thing. Or, "Hey, that strain's not popular anymore. So even though you guys just grew 200 pounds of it or 1,000 pounds of it, we'll only buy like two or one or maybe none. So you can just sit on that 200 pounds, and because it's under contract, you can't actually sell it until we need it again." And so they would do shady business shit like that in the legal business and in the 215 days when it was just like, here's your medical card, go have fun, good luck, find some find some product. And if you can link up with a group and call yourself a co-op, you can have 99 plants and make it work. But now it's a lot more regulated, and even then people are trying to pull this bullshit like we talked about few weeks ago on the show. There was that off the charts brand that was basically got caught by Big Red's farm on video. They exposed, they were saying, "Oh yeah, other than our big 30 brands, we just don't pay like our other 180 or 200 brands. Like they're mom and pops. They're just going to go out of business, and they're not going to get any money from us. Like fuck them. Like we'll just not pick up the phone and ignore them, and we'll just keep going about our days. Like we saved so much money by not paying these people." And it was kind of a gut punch. And I think that thankfully the community, a lot of the people do boycott and figure out we don't want to support evil bullshit business. We just want some good weed at a fair price, but we're not going to do it on the backs of mom and pop businesses going under. So, especially if you find a product you love, you want it to continue to be around, not to no longer exist because some greedy asshole sitting in a business boardroom decided, hey, I'm going to teach all my buddies how to fuck over all these small mom and pops. So I think it was sort of a warning shot to the community. Get your affairs in order. If you're doing this net 30 shit, make sure that you really trust the people that you're working with. A lot of people have gone to COD or cash on delivery, but that's outside the home grow space, and it's unfortunate, but yeah, it does go to that. We did a question earlier for you, Brandon. They were asking how are the triploids doing?
Triploids. Oh, I fucking just tossed them out. I didn't keep them around. I had too much stuff in my tent and I needed to thin shit out. And they weren't part of any projects. They weren't fucking anything that I really cared about. So I just fucking tossed them.
Hey, respect for the honesty. I know that there's a couple people growing them. I think the main appeal is that it's like a non-pollinatable, so that'd make it kind of hard to work with if you're trying to like breed it into any of your stuff. But it's kind of cool that they're getting out there. I will say I think that came from Nat, maybe, perhaps, but he's
Yeah.
done decent work getting some of this cool, unique, and quirky genetic stock out to the community, which I think helps bolster the prior art claims to avoid any big businesses doing these sweeping patents and shit when it goes federal, saying like, "Oh, the freak show is ours." It's like, well, actually, there's like, two or three people that have already come out and sold it widely, and it's available. Like, there's a lot of home growers growing it. Dog Doctor's got the super freak, and there's it's all over the world. So you can't say like the freak show is our patented thing or something. And with these triploid or triploid, however it's said, getting those genetics out there and so that they're available to people. I think Breeder Steve might even be doing the like we were talking about these sterile seeds. He has like a thing called Stars and Stripes Seed Co. where he's going to start putting those sterile seeds out to people. If you have like a license or whatever in your city or country, he'll send you basically like clones in the little gel capsule form in little tubes. So you have a bunch of basically tissue culture clones, and he's got quite a fucking library down there in Colombia of thousands of different strains. So uh, definitely want to go visit him someday and check out all the crazy different varieties and the many different ecological locations he's got going down there, growing basically massive scale aquaponic. I'll have to reach out to him and see if I can get Breeder Steve on because we've chatted back and forth, and he's been on Eagle's show, so I think he might be one to have on the show sometime.
I was just going to suggest that because he's coming on the Let's Be Bud show in a couple weeks. So, and I know he's open to doing shows. You should just reach out to him. I'm sure he'd love to come on.
Yeah, I will. We've DM'd back and forth on X several times, and he's clarified some stuff. I've got a buddy in Canada who's always asking me about like Canadian cannabis lore, and admittedly, I'm weak in that side of things because I'm a little bit younger than a lot of the old school guys out here, and on top of that, I'm not regional to Canada. I'm a US guy, and so a lot of the stories and stuff. It's that border. It does a lot of separation, man. Like if anybody here has crime on their record, for example, and they try to go to Canada, you sort of get locked out. So if you have like a DUI or something like that, or large amount of other, things that you might not expect can prevent people from getting into Canada. So it can be a difficulty, and not only getting over there physically, but just the stories and things like that. A lot of cannabis was underground. It was sort of a culture. You learned it from your buddies while you're smoking with them. And unless I was there in those circles with you, which unfortunately I haven't admittedly been to Canada enough and smoked enough with the Canadians up there to indulge in a lot of that culture. It's difficult because Google pushes a lot of shit down, and a lot of these old websites, forums, and stuff get deleted. And so by the time I search back through like a seed finder link to, oh, this strain came from this guy, from that person that's been crossed into this and that, it's like it's too far gone sometimes. And I'm looking into it more from the genetic side of things than the cannabis history and lore, unless I got to personally experience it. I know Brandon's got one that I'm sure the bull rider would have kind of like a lore or a history to it that makes it special. But I'm curious if there's any other ones that have kind of like a story to it that's it's more than just the genetic.
Also curious about what Brandon thought about Spain.
Oh yeah, shit, we need to talk about Spanimus. It's been an hour and 10. So fuck it, let's just go straight to that.
All right. Before we get started, I'll show you guys my little thing here. Turn this around. Just harvested this fucking monster. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but you know,
Yeah, it's a nice one, man. What strain is that?
it's Blueberry train wreck times MK Ultra. I'm doing a bunch of line work on that Blueberry train mac, taking it back to the parents, or I guess I should say the offspring of the parents. Okay, Spain. I fucking lost my luggage when I got there. And I also didn't have cell reception. I didn't realize I wasn't gonna have fucking phone service. I just didn't even fucking think about it. So lost cell phone service, never got that. I was like, what the fuck am I gonna do? I can't get a hold of anybody. My luggage is lost. I was at the mercy of hotspot and Wi-Fi. And after about, at the second day, later in the afternoon, was able to recover my bags. But I just had to like fucking write it out, and just be like, fuck it. There's nothing really I can do about the situation being what it is with my cell phone. I'm not gonna be able to, contact anybody, you know. But overall had a great time. Actually drank more than I normally do. We had a lot of drinks in fucking Barcelona. But it was cool, man. It's architecture's kind of cool and stuff. And the cool thing really is that the best part of it is just the meeting people, like I've met Kyle Cushman before. I've met Danny Danko, I've talked to Adam Dunn and Dave all the time. And just being able to catch up and spend time with all the like American cannabis people is kind of cool, because a lot of these folks are people that were writing High Times magazines when I was a fucking kid. I was reading their articles and I'd see these people, and now I'm like, in the same circles as them. I'm going to the same events. These people know me. I go say hi to them whenever we cross paths. It's just cool. It's a cool experience to see um so many talented, hash makers and cultivators and writers and people that are from the industry all just kind of come together in a single place. And then also the networking. It's these events are the only types of place
Best, man. That was so
where
good.
you'll just get stopped. Like I'll get stopped. Someone will be like, Brandon, oh man. I had these cats that were from South America, that they got into some trouble. They ended up moving to Spain, but they have a farm, and they were telling me about how I've never spoken to them on the phone or anything, but they were like, dude, you saved our farm. Like all the information that you give out, like, so stuff like that is cool. It validates what we do with the education stuff when you see people who are being successful because they've been following along with what you do and the information that you share. So really cool. And the women are fucking, just the asses out there are incredible. Just ass everywhere. It's just they're, for whatever reason, their pants just make their butts look fantastic. I don't know what it is. It's just that was one of the things that I definitely noticed.
Tighter pants.
Yeah. No, it was a cool trip. I'm definitely gonna do it again. I think that now that I know what to expect, uh,
Yeah.
better prepared next time. I have cell phone service. I won't have a rental that's 6 stories, a 6-story climb.
Oh wow, dude. I didn't hear about that. A 6-story climb. That would have got old fast.
It was cool though because we had our own private rooftop balcony that
That's
looked
cool.
over the plaza. So it was pretty cool. Yeah, and I was out there with Julie from Skunk Magazine, Brandon Palma, who's the magazine like the creative director. He does all the layout and all that stuff, puts everything together, formats it. Frank from Purple Caper Seeds and myself. So we all kind of I was kind of like the team. We went to all the different events together and shit like that. So we'll see next year what the team will be. I'm sure it'll be a little bit different next year.
That was probably my favorite part, just walking around and seeing like you said, people you've known about or been watching pretty much, from the beginning. And now they're walking around like real people in real life right next to you. And that's crazy to see. And it's cool to even catch up with people I've talked to online, but not in real life. But like Ed Rosenthal or I don't know, any of the people. It was just that was my favorite part was just meeting them in person in real life.
Yeah, I had a pretty long conversation with Ed. He's pretty funny.
Oh man, he had me his new book. We flipped, I'm not kidding you, page every page of the book, and he had to tell me about every picture, and I'd ask him questions, and we went through the whole book. That was I wasn't expecting that. That was pretty awesome. That was pretty special.
It was kind of cool. You had like the wingman experience of being there with GML and also with Marcus Bubbleman,
Yeah,
and
dude.
Yep.
just like shouting out like, "Oh, hey, Kyle Cushman over there," and like to me, like you guys were talking like that. I'd fangirl a little bit because like he's the one who kept the strawberry, you know, fucking alive for such a long time
Yeah.
and made it available to so many people. That strawberry cough, it's one of the first named strains that I actually got to smoke, and it lived up to its name. I was like, holy fuck, this is awesome. Like it's called strawberry cough. It tastes like strawberries. It makes me fucking cough and gets me high as shit. It was a little expensive at the time. I was in Ohio. This was like I was young, paying $60 for the eighth back in those days. Just
Oh yeah.
not a fun time. People are still paying that these days, believe it or not, in the legal market, before tax, which is even crazier. But yeah, we got Noah the grower jumping in. Hell yeah. We'll see him here in just a minute. But yeah, man, it's Brandon, speaking of meeting people, when I bumped into Capulator when I was at Hall of Flowers, he mentioned that he knew you and he loves the blueberry train back.
Oh yeah. I wonder if he's growing any of it. I haven't talked to him in a while. I should probably check in and see if he popped any of that stuff. But I'd given him we've traded seeds, dude. He gave me like 400 of his Mac 1 Starfighter, the gas. I've got a bunch of his gear too.
Yeah, I was telling him you were growing that gas, the Great Aunt's Secret or something like that.
Yeah, that's the one, man. I did some work with that. It was fucking really fantastic. I really fucking like that one.
He's a cool dude. I liked all of his stuff except for the Mac 1. Funny enough, like the thing that he's most famous for, and maybe I'm a fucking hipster, but like I smelled all of his jars and I liked every one except for the fucking Mac 1 and it was like from him directly. So there's like no doubting it at this point anymore. It's just not for me. Like that's not the
Yeah.
fucking one. And some people don't
Uh,
like terpenoline, so I get it. Like I love fucking
Wait, Mac 1
terpenoline.
doesn't have any terpenoline.
No, I know his doesn't. I was just using that as an example of like something that I do love that other people hate. Like people hate
Yeah.
Jack Terps. They're like, oh fuck anything Jack. Like I hate Jack or Jack Terps or Durban or anything like that.
Whenever I hear people say they don't like Jack Terps, I immediately think that they've never tried the real thing. Because if you've ever had that real cut, that shit is fucking fantastic. And it's not just like a one note lemon pine. It is very complex. It's very deep. It's got a lot of different earthy notes to it.
Cedar,
It's
fucking there's pine and the like deeper pine, like the woody pine, the terpenoline pine. There's spice to it. It's Jack is definitely it's all over the place. There's like everything is in it. It's kind of crazy. It's a wild string.
actually ATG Acres had grown out a really, really nice batch recently. But I probably had a couple of ounces that I smoked to the head.
I love his style, man. He's taking everything like 10, 11, 12 weeks and just growing those long flowering things and just saying, fuck it, I'm gonna grow the dank and people will, pay a little bit more and get the fucking I don't even know if they're necessarily paying a little bit more, but I would imagine I'd pay a little bit more for his stuff. It looks
Well,
like it's packaged well and grown well and taken to the proper lengths.
I think he only does that like once a year, but he just did a bunch of long flowering varieties, including one of mine, which was a freebies that I gave away a couple years ago, which was P91 Bull Rider Super Silver Haze times Lime 1 BX. But he hits like 5 pounds of fucking light with that stuff.
Fuck yeah, dude. Good for him. I love his
Fucking
family, man. They're like salt of the earth, like best people you'll ever fucking meet. And I feel the same way about Brandon and everybody else I've gotten to meet on this panel. But when I got to go visit him on his farm and his wife and daughter and now daughter, I don't know if his second kid is a girl or a boy, but getting to see his family grow and him follow his dream. I hate that it happens to has to be out in Oklahoma to some extent because the California regulatory regime was not necessarily too friendly to people like him, myself, or Brandon. So greener pastures being Oklahoma, I'm happy that he was able to pursue it and do it above board and make a real brand that can become, hopefully something multi-generational for him and his kids. And I just couldn't say enough good things about him. I've always got his name in the description. Like, check out atgacres.com. If he ever wants to come back, he's always welcome. And I know Brandon gets to run into him more than most of us. So, uh,
Yeah, I see
great
him all
dude.
the time. Because we out in Oklahoma.
The
But
weed community
I
is small. I can imagine there it's even more so the case, right? Like most people gotta somewhat know each other, even if they're not hanging out all the time.
yeah. I'm maybe transitioning and moving to Chicago. We
Okay.
shall. I'm gonna go out there next week and formulate a plan. But the doctor has asked me a bunch of times to move out there. He wants me to help work on some projects and stuff. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for me.
Just gotta make sure that paycheck is right. But with that said, I gotta make sure I welcome in Noah the Grow, who's been patiently hanging out after I mentioned he was gonna be coming in, and I forgot to introduce him.
How's it going, everybody? Yeah, sorry I'm a little bit late. Hanging out with the family for Easter and stuff. But yeah, I'm Noah the Road with Louise on Instagram. You can find me there. I'm happy to be here.
Better late than never, coming in hot with the garden. I love it.
Oh
Looking
yeah,
good.
why not?
Looking good, as
Why
always.
not?
Fire.
Yeah, I always get excited when I come out here, and seeing the growth from the last time I was out here and tucking leaves and doing little things and
They've got to already
having
smell
fun.
good. They've already
Oh,
got to smell good at that point.
oh, dude, I could smell it down the block when I was coming to my house. Unfortunately,
Maybe time for a new carbon filter cover or carbon filter. Who knows?
yeah, you're probably right. I do got one. I got a carbon filter right there. But yeah, it's not working so hot.
Yeah, sometimes the dank just it powers through. And at least you're in a legal region where like you're not, sweating as much as some people if they're in like a red state. But yeah, man, it's always a little concerning when you come home and you start smelling dank like 10 feet before you
Yes.
get to the door. I'm like, oh fuck. I
Yep.
did good, but at the same time, I'm not doing so good with the hiding of it. At least most people in my neighborhood I'm super cool with now, and most people know because I gift them some of the home grow. So they're less likely to want to fuck with it because they're benefiting from it if they want it. So
Yes.
it's always good to have the privacy element, though. I'm a big fan of operational security. I think in all things as much as you can, uh, whether it's online or in person, it's really easy to underestimate your security until something really bad happens to you. And hopefully you can survive that really bad incident, and then you'll probably be fucking jaded for a long time. And hopefully you can, not think that the whole world is shitty, but also realize like there is some people that are fucking real bad people out there. So you got to just, keep your head on a swivel a little bit, depending on where you're at, and always know that you really, I hate to say this, but you have to look out for yourself in terms of, protecting yourself because no one else is fucking gonna do it. Even if there's a security guard at that event, if shit really starts going down, they're gonna protect their own ass and like very, very small percentage of it. And not to disparage security guards, everybody is gonna look after themselves when shit starts hitting the fan. So just don't be lulled into the false sense of security that security is gonna necessarily be what's there to make you safe.
I 100% agree with that. And having been around cannabis and cannabis orientated things in the 90s and early 2000s, I can attest to, yeah, you got to keep your head on a swivel. And it's a lot different now with the legal market, but I'm sure there's still pinchers and people out there that will try and get ahead.
Yeah, some people are,
That's just
I
part of
think
it.
it's good to be comfortable, but I think that some people might be a little bit too comfortable, and I've probably been guilty of that at times. But different level people have different levels of what is important to them in terms of like I know people that used to like take different cars from the grocery store and things like that and like drive different places. Like they take 2 or 3 hours to get home, doing all these different stops to make sure that they're not like being tailed and things like that. And they had to because they were the smart ones. Those are the ones that are still doing it because they didn't get fucking busted. But a lot of them fucking did. And the whole Operation Green Merchant, even just like handing over a lot of people's basically like credit card statements and who was spending money in these shops. A lot of people were smart to pay with cash. But yeah, you never know. We've got Dr. MJ joining us here in just a minute, and I'll probably forget to introduce him because I'm getting up stoned over here. I'm actually smoking on a little bit of a Jack Cross. It's called Key Lime Jack, and it's fucking great. I love Jack. And it does have a little bit of key liminess to it. And I'm not even sure. It's got to be some limonene, but there's something else. It's not just your general limonene. There's like a creaminess to key lime, I think. Key limes are their own type of lime, aren't they? Dr. MJ, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, sorry I'm late again and like been absentee for a while, but I'm happy to show up when I can. So I wanted to jump on and say hi to everybody.
Hope you're doing well. We are just chit-chatting a little bit, and I was talking about Jack earlier in Jack Terps, and forgot to mention that I was smoking on key lime Jack, which has some actual key liminess to it, but it also has that classic Jackie terpinolene pinene combination, nice uplifting, happy, positive, focus, maybe a little bit creative stone that I really enjoy. I know you're a fellow Jack Herrera enthusiast, as I see you nodding over there. That's one that we've both grown in the past and enjoyed.
Yeah, I like all the alpha pinene. That's a good alpha pinene strain. Yeah, and the Jack Herrera I grew a few years ago was one of my favorite plants like of all time. It was the sort of contemplating the nature of the universe strain. So I find that the alpha pinene often sort of brings that out in me.
It's nice to be able to zone in on whatever it is, pondering the universe or, getting something done. It helps me overcome because I've had a bunch of head injuries. I played football and I had older brothers and we were fucking rowdy, man. We'd fight and get into fucking really like aggressive, like fist fights, like headbutts, like punches thrown. Like we were the rough and tumble type. I was the youngest of three boys, so I definitely got bashed around and my head certainly
Yeah.
wasn't the better for it. And cannabis has certainly helped, I think, because I noticed markedly. I got arrested when I was 16, and like I was a everyday smoker from like eighth grade till when I was 16. And when I turned or when I had to stop smoking because I got arrested and I was being randomly drug tested, um, I noticed all the concussions and stuff that I had from football, even like second grade to 10th grade playing tackle football, had already started to catch up with me because I was a space cadet. Like I didn't used to be that person who couldn't necessarily like keep focus, but then I'd start smoking like this piney bud and I'd be able to like zone in and like watch a show all the way through and like be super fucking focused or whatever it was. Like I wouldn't lose that train of thought as quickly. So cannabis, I think, certainly helps. I think I am probably a little bit on the ADHD side of things. I don't know if that's from concussions or genetics, but that's cannabis. I also think I saw one study a long time ago, and it was like one of the most mind-blowing things. I can almost never find it anymore. Maybe it got disproven or whatever, but it's like 100% of people in the study. It was like 38 out of 38 people who switched off their ADHD medication to cannabis ended up staying on cannabis. So it was a small pilot study, but everybody in that study that switched ended up liking it a lot. So they're like, hey, fuck, this works better for me. And that showed me something that, there's certainly powerful medical benefits to it for lots of different populations.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes people sort of feel better and be better able to manage their lives, and oftentimes better than any other kind of, I mean, as a society, we're kind of to the point where we accept that a lot of people need certain chemicals to, focus better, manage their lives better in one way or another, deal with anxiety, maintain focus, decrease stress, other things like that. And yeah, cannabis does that for a lot of people in a really effective way.
And it's like, it doesn't have to be just cannabis. I'm open for people using like microdosing of mushrooms or even like ketamine, if that's what works for them to help them with like some of the stuff. And people like to underestimate it because mental health is like not looked at as seriously in a lot of circumstances as physical health. Like if you're in a wheelchair, nobody's questioning your ailment. But if you have a mental health issue, a lot of people are like, suck it up, or like maybe it's not as bad as you actually think. So a lot of the times people with mental health have maybe even more so, stresses on dealing with their issues. So being able to have something where they're not going to in risk, overdosing or harming themselves even using their product is a big thing. So having safe use and safe access for people is a major thing for me.
Yeah, for sure.
We do have a good question. Let me see if I got the name in there. Can I scroll up? Why is my scroll not work? Oh, I scrolled up too far. Okay. Freesin also asks, got another minor question, cheap home grow. Since I'm planning to change stuff in my space, I wondered, does it bother the babies when pushed around like 3 times a day and 10 feet? Planning to put, oh, that was a extended question that I didn't get the second half of. I would say moving them around generally doesn't bother them too much.
We've been had a couple comments in chat about Doc, if you could turn your mic up a little bit, you seem kind of quiet. You're quiet on my end too, but I wasn't sure if it was just me.
Sorry. It would be better probably if I just move my mic a little bit closer to me, but I can also try to pick up the gain. I stick the mic down on this lower shelf sometimes just to get it like out of my way, and then I forget that like nobody can freaking hear me anymore if I do that.
Perfect. This sounds way better.
Good. Sorry about that, everyone. And then I just assume like you can hear me because like I can hear myself, but I'm sitting in the room with me, so it's a lot easier for me to hear myself.
I had headphones on so I can always hear everybody. And then like people are like, they're too quiet. I'm like, I couldn't tell. So I'm happy when the chat actually calls it out and then we can make the adjustment.
So I play a little bit of the contrarian. I am in the camp that says if you don't have to move the plants, you probably shouldn't move the plants. Like plants, you're right, Jack. It's not gonna like they're gonna be like, oh my god, that was so awful for me, and I'm gonna droop over now or whatever. But plants like consistency, and I think moving them around kind of makes them kind of pause a little bit at least. And if you don't have to move them around, I'd prefer not to. I know some growers that like rotate their plants like every day, sometimes multiple times during the day, under the idea that that's going to be better. But it'd be better to just leave the plant alone. If you're rearranging your space or whatever, and you know you got to do some construction, then yeah, move the plants out of the way. Like that's totally fine. But if you can, like the less you have to bother them, the better, probably.
But Doc, everybody always quotes this one guy. I think it was like Mr. Grow It. Maybe it was Mr. Tight in Michigan. I think he said if you rotate your plants a quarter spin a day or whatever, then they're going to get more even light exposure and then more even bud density. And a lot of people live by that. I've even seen people that have little lazy Susans. Even I saw one guy had an automated one, so his
Right.
plants would rotate. And I'm
So
like,
you want me
man,
to
he's
push
putting
back on that?
electricity
Like
into
the
rotating.
plant sets up for this. The plant like sets up for where it's getting light from, and then it'll put the added chlorophyll in those areas. It'll be better sort of supported to be able to capture those photons. And then if you shift the light to another part of the plant, then the plant's like, oh shit, I'm like out of position now. I gotta like move. And then by the time you get everything over here, it's like, oh, you got moved again. Like, oh shit, I gotta move everything over here, and you're constantly moving it around. It's one of the big advantages that indoor growers have over outdoor growers is that our source of light doesn't move. The plants can optimize for it. It can be super consistent, and we can actually drive like peak photosynthesis 18 hours a day as opposed to like 90 minutes when the sun's in the middle of the sky.
It's a great point. And there's to the extent, if you go to like any big box store that sells the large cacti, they'll say when you plant this, it needs to face north, just like it's facing north right now, with like an arrow pointing north because that cacti has developed its chlorophyll so much to the point that if you turned it, 45 or 90 degrees, it might die or start developing rot because it doesn't
It's
have
going to be
the
a
ability
stress.
to quickly enough photosynthesize on that side of the plant that was never necessarily exposed to the light, even if like the angle's slightly different, at least pointing it north in like this same region, it's if you get it at your local store in the city, it's going to be okay. But it's just that kind of blew me away. And I was like, holy shit, that it does make a difference. So if you can
That's a
keep it.
great example, Jack. I like that. Yeah, the plant gets set up for receiving light in a particular way. And if you adjust it for the cactus, it might outright die. For a lot of plants, it's just going to cause them a little bit of stress and force them to like reallocate things. And that just slows them down a little bit, probably imperceptibly for most plants, but we're trying to like, grow quickly here.
I'm more of an advocate of like a little grab the stalk and shake it just a little bit to give them a little bit of like the roots resistant, make them think that they're getting like a little windstorm. They're still getting the light from the same angle. And the end of that comment was that they're just going to put them on tables. So moving them around is going to be something that is going to happen. And at any commercial grow, you'll see they're going to move plants around from one space to
Yeah,
another.
they
And
get
it
shifted back and
happens.
forth. but the
Sometimes they
light source
rotate,
there
but
is really consistent.
that's
So
what I was going to say. You want a light source that's more so than like spinning your plant around in a lazy Susan. Your light might not, if you don't have like the most modern bar light, I'd get one of the modern bar light setups because then you're not going to have to worry like, oh, the corner is so much dimmer than the
yep.
center because I have a center light focus, which is like that's when you might want to rotate your plant and get some benefit from it back in the day because you had an HPS. And granted, even then, I don't think it was a great idea. But the
Yeah.
concept made more like
Yeah,
stoner
exactly.
logic of like, oh, we've got one light over there and I got a plant over here. So if I rotate it like a rotisserie chicken, the plant's not going to get too hot. It's not going to get too much. It's not going to get overwhelmed. And in some cases, I'm sure it actually helped people that would have been in situations where their plant was going to get overexposed because they were too close to the light or something like that. And there's rare fringe circumstances where it probably fucking crushed it. So please don't DM me and write in all the comments. The fucking lazy Susan tech is the shit, Jack. You fucking don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I get
Well,
it.
a lot of these same comments apply to light movers, Jack, when you
Oh, I
really
see them
get down
still.
to
I
it.
saw one the other day. I saw somebody with LEDs on light movers, and I was like, "Holy shit!" They're doing like a whole like it was like
I've seen that too.
a 10
Yeah.
by 20 room with like two LED lights for their veg space, and these light movers were doing so much fucking work, and I was just like, "Holy shit! That's not the way I would go about doing this."
No, it's not. You can get away with it in veg because you can underlight plants and still be successful in veg, but yeah, no, it's not. And you're right. You want the light to be distributed itself so that the plant can get set up to receive light everywhere. But like if the light isn't distributed everywhere itself, yeah, get a better light. But rotating the plant is just going to kind of move the parts that aren't prepared for that high density light into the high density light and move the parts of the plant that are prepared for the high density light into like lower density light, and just force the plant to adjust to all of that. So
It's interesting. It's a sort of a learning experience because I think I tend to anthropomorphize my plants. I'm guilty of it. I like to think of like, oh, I'm laying in the sun and I'm gonna have to turn over so I don't get burned, right? So I want to get like an even amount on
right.
my face and then on my back, and maybe I'll turn to the side a little bit and turn to the other side a little bit, and just like, I'm not trying to get cooked, and I don't want this one thing beating down on me for 12 hours a day. So maybe the plants would like it if I did X, Y, or Z. But ultimately, when you start to understand the fundamentals of the biology of how the photosynthesis process is working, you can understand the benefits of keeping them still. And I love my earth box so much, or the city picker. Um, Getting a plant in there, yeah, you could get little casters and wheels, but like when I get it into my tent, yeah, it's set there and I just leave it and I let it grow into its space, and it
Yep.
occupies that space and it's happy in that space. It grows like almost out to the edge of the walls of the tent, and it knows where that wall is. Once it hits it, it realizes it. They know they have a very fucking sensitive touch. I've hit that wall. Now I need to start growing up more, and they do, and they'll fill in and bulk out. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing when you just kind of let them take over that space. They do, especially in flower. Once you flip those first few weeks, it's like, oh, this is our space now. We're gonna fucking rage. So
Yeah.
let them do their thing.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to jump out a little early, guys. I'm just not feeling the greatest today. I got a crazy headache just coming in, so I'm just gonna call it early and take a shower and hope for the best. Hope
Sorry to
everybody
hear
has a
that,
good
Spartan.
night.
Hope you
Keep
feel
growing,
better.
everybody.
I hope you feel better, Spartan. And yeah, that shower hopefully will help. Maybe another Advil or something. You were mentioning got a little bit of relief from the hot shower earlier, so hopefully that will hopefully get you feeling better before Michigan Bros Grow Show. So have a great night, and thank you so much for fighting through the flu or cold or whatever it is that's bugging you. And you powered through it. You did a great job tonight on the show, so we really all appreciate it.
Take care, Spartan.
Yeah, travel's tough, man. Elevation, being around a lot of people, tight spaces, confined spaces, recirculated air. I'm sure the air at this point with the technology and the systems is probably cleaner or whatever, but standing up, walking, and I think as much as it's fun to travel, I love travel, and I'm not advocating against travel, but there's so many factors that it makes it easy to get you sick. You're eating different food, you're sleeping in a different bed, there's so many different things. You're probably excited you're staying out a little bit longer. Like Brandon, who I know is not like a big drinker of sorts, is like even gonna have a few drinks when he's at Cannabis or something like that, more than he would otherwise. So that I think takes our immunities and stuff down a little bit as well, and makes us a little bit more willing to stay out later and maybe eat that little bit greasier thing or whatever it is. So like there's so many little factors that all weigh up to, oh man, it's so easy to catch that cup cold, as a lot of people call it, or, whatever, the event flu or whatever, the bug, the super spreader event, as they used to market it as for the past few years. If there was some big event where a bunch of people got sick. And I don't mean to belittle it because some people do end up getting sick and, passing on from it, but a lot of the younger, healthier crowd are able to weather the storm and live their life. And I'm thankful that people like Spartan and Brandon are able to travel and get to experience the cool things like meeting each other for the first time in Spain, which is not what I would have expected. I was certainly thinking it would have been, somewhere here in the US and hopefully at a cheap home grow event or something. But I've been slacking and lacking on that front for sure. Definitely need to do more on the event organization front. But I think the one thing is time allows us to do this stuff a little bit better. The laws are lightening up. More states and cities are getting smoking permits for events. So if we did something, we could actually have like an on-site consumption, which would kind of, I think, defeat the purpose of a cannabis show if you can't enjoy and consume in like that area without worrying about security or police fucking with you. And
Yeah.
so you want to have something where you can really do it right and make it affordable so that a good enough group of people can get there and enjoy the fun together.
And can I comment on light movers? Just a lot of people are making comments in the chat about them.
Of course. Yes, please do.
Um, photosynthesis is really a second by second, and even less than a second, but seconds are kind of like the shortest periods of time that we're used to thinking in. So it's a second by second thing. So, light movers move the light around so that the plants aren't exposed to high density light or sort of too high density light for more than a few seconds. During those few seconds, the plants are stressed. They're not sort of able to use all of the light that they're given to them, but the light mover keeps them from being sort of excessively stressed because they're only stressed for a little bit. In a similar way, most plants in the noonday sun are stressed because they're getting sort of more light than they want, but they're able to handle that because it only lasts for like an hour. If it lasted for 20 hours, they'd be cooked, but they can handle it for a little while. So light movers sort of allow plants to tolerate too dense light for that short period of time, but it doesn't increase the amount of light that you're really giving to the plants. It doesn't increase the amount of usable light that you're giving to the plants. So like running it closer doesn't help. That just sort of gives them even more light for just a short period of time, but they can't use it. They're going to be stressed and not use it during that period of time. So if you have, one of the reasons that light movers get used is because the larger, especially early on, the largest HPS lights were by far the cheapest HPS lights to run. So you'd get these like sort of really high powered lights and you couldn't just use them. You had to kind of move them around because it was literally too much light, or you'd have to hang it like way too high. It was much more efficient than running a smaller HPS light. I mean, I don't really see any advantages to running LEDs or other lights like that. Having excessive PPFD moving around in the space, I don't think there's much to support that by way of science. And I don't know if there's been any studies, but I certainly haven't come across any that advocate for having excessive PPFD sort of like moving around inside the grow space. Just for what it's worth. I mean, light is like a quantity thing. We're worried about how much we can deliver to the plants and how they can use it. I don't think light movers really solve those problems. Anyways, that's just my 2 cents on light movers.
Well, and even when we're not discussing light movers, when we're talking about light being a quantity thing, people in the chat are talking about DLI, and they're talking about that because it's measured, this amount of sunlight, if you're at the equator, is different than if you're in Alaska, right? So the DLI is going to be different, and the plants that you're growing are different. The hardiness zones are going to be different. But even, indoors, if you're using a light mover, like Doc was saying, the plants are basically able to take in 100% of the photosynthesis they can produce, or, they can produce it like 100% pretty much right when the lights go on. And so if you're running the light for 12 hours, you can get 12 hours worth of light in terms of like the, uh, thermodynamics, the physics of it all. Like the light that goes out, there's only so many hours, seconds, minutes in the day, and the plant can only produce for, in most cases 12 hours for if you're doing a flower cycle. And so limiting it, um, whether you're using a light mover and veg or flower, you are ultimately taking away from the ultimate like net total that you could have done if everything is kept ideal. So I think ultimately it's a budget constrained thing. Like you only do that when you're very early on getting set up
Yeah.
until you can afford more lights to properly fill out the space, and then ultimately get your lights set up so that they're covering all the plants, and then you can grow that space out and then pack out enough flower rooms to be constantly producing. And it'll be, if you do things right, I think even at this time, almost every market you're in, if you do it right, this is a business that works. This business model does work. You can look at Brandon, you can look at Aaron, you can look at a lot of other guys, small scale, large scale. If you do it well, it sells. And even if you kind of mess up a little bit, you can make a lot of stuff into extracts. So if you just, get enough biomass underneath enough light and you're feeding it somewhat in the right range and drying and harvesting and curing, not to oversimplify it, but you can really guarantee yourself a pretty successful setup unless sometimes there's outside factors. The anti-competitive business practice I've talked about in many episodes, but I won't dwell too much into that. But yeah, I think a lot of people want to shortcut, and like he's sitting quietly as he typically does on these shows. Not a lot of people ask IPM questions until they're dealing with them, but like not including someone like a Matthew Gates or an IPM specialist within your grow is certainly, in my opinion, setting yourself up for some sort of short or long-term failure because, you know, at best, one of your probably the way that this stuff gets figured out, like to play it out for people in reality, in your own home grow, you'll see it yourself, is at a commercial scale, somebody will like it'll be some guy who's watering or trimming or de-leafing, who's probably like close to a minimum wage worker at a lot of these places, or like in Aaron's case, like the grower, like the facility in our case, the home grower. But by the time you notice it, like there's probably damage being done, and that visible damage that's done is going to be a little bit significant. And ideally, you can try and figure out what it is. And most people just don't know, unless it's like spider mites or something you've had before. And even then, sometimes it can be tricky to fight them because who knows, are they a more resistant type to whatever thing that you used to fight it last time? Or maybe you've never fought it off, maybe just chopped everything down and restarted. So I think as much as I enjoy and appreciate talking about it, I know a lot of the community doesn't necessarily love all of the IPM talk because it's like we want to kind of have wishful thinking, right? Like hope that it's not going to happen to me. But at the end of the day, I think it is important. So I'm curious if Matthew has any thoughts of anything in the current season, because I know we're kind of spring is around the corner. Things are coming up here, and we'll make it specific to Southern California, maybe San Diego area. If there's anything that you're hearing or seeing about that's been springing up in people's gardens or causing problems.
Well, and I do agree with a lot of what you said. I feel as though lately a lot of people have been dealing with a lot of the same problems that people have in the past. I just helped somebody out with I actually helped two people out recently, a couple of weeks ago with the rice root aphids. Big problem, For them, it was a situation where, like, a lot of other cases, they just didn't happen. They knew what aphids were, like theoretically, but they'd never heard of a rice root aphid. So they weren't searching for the, roots, and so they were wondering why it kept coming back.
Trying
Uh,
trying to find root aphids in your media in soil, at least in cocoa, can oftentimes be difficult. They can be very difficult to spot, especially if you don't have really high populations and they're not
they can kind
crawling
of
around.
blend in, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they can be real hard to spot for sure. But you'll
Yeah, I
know if you have them,
sympathize.
especially if they start to, sprout wings and start crawling on the outsides of your pots. And
Yeah, which is what ended up happening, and I was like, oh well, yeah. I mean, I told them to check the roots originally, and the coloration was correct. So that's an example. Um, I talked about it recently on a podcast, but a lot of these agricultural fungi that people are dealing with, and I talked about this, I think, several sessions ago here. But like, your Septoria, got a lot of questions about Septoria at the Living Soil Summit, for example. So I should probably make a video about that. Um, I know I promised that I would make a big ol' cannabis pest predictions video in the springtime when you could use that information, but I've been busy with a lot of cool projects coming online, which I can't totally talk about. So you'll have to just be aware of them when they come and release. But it's occupied a lot of my time, but I do want to do more of that in the future on my YouTube channel. But to talk about some of the things I've already come across, I feel as though not just the budworm that I always talk about, but like the fall armyworm that's really common in the United States. And not just talking about North America, but also like it's a huge problem in, I don't think we have a lot of viewers in the People's Republic of China, but also Africa, various parts of Africa and South America too. It's just kind of everywhere. That was a big one that was found in a survey that we went over together for pests in the U.S. And so, um, and I'm also kind of like Breast continues to be a problem and things like this, but generally speaking, yeah, I feel like those are the things that I'm worried about. More moths coming online, um, fungi like fight and water molds and things like that are really common in other agricultural crops, but are getting their due and are being recorded more in cannabis. So, um, and that kind of also is a reason why I feel like, just like other crops, I feel as though there's going to be regional changes year to year. And I think that if you're in a situation where you haven't dealt with some of these now, doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. And I think that's the most important takeaway is prepare even for things that you've heard other people deal with that you haven't dealt with because it might come. And if it doesn't, great, but you'd rather not like wait, right? Just like you were saying, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they're around, like your buddies have it, or you're hearing about it in the news, and it might be something that has some crossover. We've seen with hop latent viroid that it can. It doesn't always. Like there are some flowers that might get powdery mildew, and there's so many different types of powdery mildew that it might not be one that can cross over. But I would tend to not want to take the risk of cross contamination or exposures and things like that. But we got a quick question that we could do a quick around the horn. Johnny Candice says, "Hey Jack, what is everyone's favorite cloning technique?" And because Johnny Candice had asked, I'll say the sand tech from Johnny, where you just put it straight in the sand. Uh, because I go into soil, it's cheap, easy, and it works. Usually about a week, you got roots. Other than that, my most used method, because that's a newer one for me, admittedly, is the deep water culture style clone where you have an air stone. I just use a like air hose going in to like two of the 20 collar thing. I have like a 20 site clone unit that you basically fill up the bottom with water, pump air into it, and then you stick little clones into these little rubberish permaclone collars that can be sterilized. So everything gets nice and clean and get roots usually 7 to 14 days and can plant that right in the soil as well and usually take off. So those are my methods. Noah the grower, what is your favorite cloning technique?
I like the arrow, basically deep water culture version. I've done the rapid rooters and the little peat moss things you can sometimes get from the hydro store and stuff. And I've done in water, I've done it all. But the admittedly the reason I like the other one is I can just put them in there and then just make sure the water levels are right and basically just let it go. The trick that I always use is if I want to keep like 4 clones, then I'll usually put like 6 if I can in there, and then even if they all root, I'll just keep the best ones, the ones who rooted the fastest, or just sometimes they just don't root. Like sometimes that little sprayer doesn't get over to that section, and it's just better to have more, and then you can always cull from there. So that's usually what I do.
It's a good plan in my opinion. Brandon, what's your favorite cloning technique?
I just do standard clone, nothing special. I'm usually using the little peat plugs, rapid rooters or whatever else they're called, easy clone plugs. But one thing that I always do that I think maybe not everybody does is I pre-treat my clones. I dunk my clones or I stick them, and then after they're rooted, I do another pre-treatment for IPM.
What are you dunking them in? I'm assuming maybe sulfur or something else.
So either micronized sulfur with a surfactant or like Sulfoyl X horticulture oil.
From the initial dunk to when you're applying, what's the time window if you were going to use those two that you would go from like the initial dunk time to the second spray or follow-up application?
No, I don't spray or anything while they're rooting. Only I do another dunk once they're rooted and they're going to their next home or whatever space they're moving up to, you know.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. And Doc, what's your favorite cloning technique?
Yeah, generally when I'm taking a few clones around here, I do the same thing that Brandon was describing, you know, just pea pellets, a little bit of Clonex gel, maybe, keep them in a humidity dome for a week, 10 days, and keep it wet in there. On larger scales, like, you know, I consult for growers that have to have, you know, 1,000 clones every 2 weeks for their flower rooms or whatever. Then I usually prefer more automated systems, but there's always issues with those too. So sometimes, I mean, I have a grower I'm working with now that does 700 plus plants, gone back to peat plugs to do cloning just because it was having several runs with their aeroponic cloners that didn't take. So was getting frustrated with that and went back to sort of do it the old fashioned way. But when the aeroponics or the hydroponic cloners do work, they certainly make things a little bit easier and I don't know, a little bit quicker. But yeah, they can be almost as much work, I guess, in the long run.
You can bang out a shit ton of clones at a pretty small area because if you wanted to, you can double or even triple up those collars. And there's like some that have like 100, 200 site. So like
Yeah.
you're saying, if you're looking for like 1,000 clones, like some of those things, like one little like desktop area could produce something like that crazy enough. And when they're working, like you're saying, when they're clean, when their emitters aren't
Yeah.
clogged or something like that, and when they're sterilized properly between runs, and when the water is cool enough to make the clones like to root.
And when you have the HVAC set up in that little room properly and you're able to maintain the right temperatures and you're not blowing stuff, I mean, just so many different things seem to be able to go wrong with these systems too. So it,
It's a rack with a bunch of clone domes and root riots or rapid rooters or jiffy pucks
yeah,
is so simple, cheap, and
the
effective that you
domes,
see
man,
it so many places.
the domes, you'd be surprised at how many issues. We had this room set up to do with over 1,000 aeroponic clones, but they're just there's no dome over them. They're just growing in the room. You need to climate control that room, and climate controlling the room proved like, I mean, a harder task than you'd imagine. And then they finally got the room, but there was like so much air blowing across them that was drying out the clones. And I don't know, it was a bigger challenge than we imagined it would be at the outset.
It can be tricky, and I'm happy Johnny asked that, but it's about that time that we go around the panel and everybody gives their final thoughts and shout outs, and I'm going to pass it first to Matthew Gates.
Yeah, that was interesting. I appreciate the question about IPM. I actually saw a report recently that just came out about cannabis and humic acid and biomass and nutrients that we could take a look at next session. But
Oh,
if you'd
yeah,
like to learn more about plant health and IPM stuff, you can check me out at zentinel.com for professional inquiries. You can also check me out at youtube.com/sentinel and also on X as SyncAngel and Instagram as SyncAngel as well. And I have my first Smoke of the Day interview coming out soon. And also my Living Soil Summit presentation will also be available for those who can access it soon as well. So talk to you later.
Very good stuff. Thank you, as always, Matthew. Appreciate your IPM and other input, as always. Happy when we can weave it in there, even if I'm just trying to force it on the people who are maybe like, no, I don't want to hear about it. But you got to hear about it. You need to know. You need to know.
Sometimes you need a little exposure therapy.
I always think of that meme where they're like holding the like person's eyes open, like making them watch. But anyway, next up we got Dr. MJ Coco for final thoughts and shout outs.
Hey guys, I'm glad I could be here for at least the last part of the show. I'll try to be a more regular participant here going forward, but it's tough. I've got other things going on Sundays that I'm trying to get to. But it was fun. Jack, thanks for hosting us every week. The rest of the panelists, always a pleasure to join you guys, and thanks for being here holding on the fort. Much grower love to our chat community out there and everybody else that listens to us out there in the growing universe. I'm Dr. MJ Coco. Check out my YouTube channel. Check out my Patreon page. I do the Ask Dr. Coco show every Monday night for my Patreon subscribers. And of course, check out cocoforcannabis.com, where we publish articles, tutorials, and guides on the science and practice of growing cannabis, and have an active and vibrant community over there, 24-hour chat room, growers forum, all that kind of stuff. So come visit us at cocoforcannabis.com and come back to the live show every Sunday afternoon, and I'll try to be here more frequently myself. Grow love, everyone.
Hey, better late than never. I always say you're always welcome, and we're always happy to have you. And shout out to Johnny with the Johnny Tech. He is saying everybody should give it a try. He gets 98% success rate with just sand, and it's basic Quickcrete from any of your big box stores. Quickcrete sand, just pre-washed stuff, and it's like just a few bucks a bag. And if you are having troubles with cloning, that might be a solution for you. He just throws it in a little plastic tub, gets it a little bit damp, and then sticks his clones in there. And then a week later, boom, they root. I've tried it. It does work. It's cheap, easy, and effective. So it might be the option for you if you're looking for one. But next up, we've got Brandon Rust.
What's going on? It's good to be back. Chop it up with y'all. We got some cool projects in the works, so make sure you guys are following along on Instagram and the other social platforms. And then make sure you guys check out Bokashi Earthworks for all your humate fertilizer needs, microbes, amendments, all that good stuff.
Thanks as always for joining us, Brandon. And last and certainly not least of the panelists this evening is Noah the Grower.
Yeah, sorry I was late myself. I was doing some Easter stuff, but yeah, I was listening very, very intently. I always try and pay attention myself. I always learn something from everyone. Always have a blast. And yeah, I'm Noah the Grower on Instagram, and I'll be taking some pictures of the plants I showed earlier and putting them up there. I'll see everybody next week.
Thanks as always, Noah. The garden's looking beautiful as always. I'm sure it's smelling great in there, and I'm happy that you're smelling it before you get to the door. And even if it's a good problem to have, but happy having you as always, and happy having all of you, the listeners, the panel. It's a great time for me every Sunday. I look forward to this, so I'm always happy when I can make it, which is most of the time, and I really do enjoy this. So you can find me at Jack Greenstock right there on Instagram, Jack_Greenstock on X, and if you want to find any of my products and things like that, 50strains.com. That's STRAINS.com. 50 strains, like 50 strains of green, which is the book that I've got just one box of left, and I'm coming so close to finishing 50 strains of purple. Hopefully it's done before 420, because that'd be a nice time to do a little pre-sale or sale. Hopefully we can get them printed and launched, because my printer's right down the street. I can go talk to them and get the numbers, figure out how many of you guys actually want one, and get them printed up and shipped out. Maybe do a hardback, because a lot of people requested that last time. And I think it'd be cool to have some hardback editions, a little bit more durable, long-lasting history there for the weed nerds out there. But with all that being said, peace and love, everybody. Catch you all next week. Keep on growing, growers love, and shout out to Tao, who we missed this week, and everybody else. Catch you all next time.
Grower love, everyone.